Something in her brain that had been building for years finally rupturing. She lingered for 2 days, conscious but paralyzed, unable to speak. Ezra was destroyed. Through the bond, I felt his grief, his guilt. He'd been so focused on saving strangers that he'd missed his wife's declining health. And worse, part of him, the part he hated, felt relief that the woman he'd married out of duty rather than passion was leaving, making room for his true love. He hated himself for that relief, and I hated watching him suffer. On the second night, as Rebecca's breathing grew labored and death approached, she managed to catch my hand. Her eyes found mine, pleading. I understood immediately what she wanted, what she couldn't ask with words but desperately needed. She wanted me to save her the way I'd saved Eliana. I could do it. My healing magic could repair the rupture in her brain, restore her to health. It would cost me greatly, would require channeling more power than was safe, but I could save her. But through the bond, I felt Ezra's conflict. He loved Rebecca in his way, didn't want her to die, but he also knew that saving her would mean complications he wasn't sure he could handle. 2 wives, 2 bonds, 2 different kinds of love demanding his attention and loyalty. And in that moment, I realized the truth of what Rebecca had warned me about. Ezra would never stop trying to save everyone, would never accept that sometimes you had to let go, would tear himself apart trying to fix the unfixable, unless someone made the hard choice for him. I can't save her, I told him quietly. What? But you saved Eliana. Eliana was young, strong, with her whole life ahead of her. Rebecca is dying from something that's been building for years. I could heal the immediate rupture, but her body is failing in other ways. I could buy her months, maybe a year, but at tremendous cost to both of us. And she would spend that time knowing she was borrowed time, living on magical life support. It was a lie, mostly a lie, but it was the merciful lie, the one that would let him grieve without guilt, let Rebecca die with dignity, and spare us all the complications of what would have happened if I'd saved her. Through the bond, I felt Ezra's anguish. He knew I was lying. Our connection made deception nearly impossible, but he also felt my reasoning, understood that I was offering him an escape from an impossible situation. He chose to accept the lie. Then let her go peacefully, he said, his voice breaking. Make sure she doesn't suffer. I held Rebecca's hand and channeled just enough magic to ease her pain, to let her slip away gently rather than gasping and struggling. She died at dawn, her last moments free of fear or agony. And Ezra wept in my arms while Eliana sobbed in the next room, both of them grieving the woman who had been wife and mother, partner and foundation of their family. I grieved too, in my way, not for Rebecca herself, we'd never been close, but for the choice I'd made, for using my power to choose who lived and who died, for playing God when I'd spent millennia refusing to bow to any God at all. Through the bond, Ezra felt my guilt. And in the days that followed, as we sat Shiva and prepared Rebecca's body for burial, something shifted between us. The easy joy of our first weeks together was gone, replaced by something more complex, a partnership forged not just in love and magic, but in shared difficult choices and their consequences. You did what you thought was right, Ezra said one night as we sat in his study, the house dark and quiet around us. I can't fault you for that. Can't you? I let your wife die when I could have saved her. Could you really have, or were you being honest about her condition? Does it matter? Either way, I made the choice. Not you, not her, me. And I'll spend the rest of my life grateful that you did, he admitted quietly, which makes me a terrible person, doesn't it? I should be angry with you. I should hate you for letting her die, but all I feel is relief, that it's over, that I don't have to keep trying to love 2 women in 2 different ways, that I can finally just be with you without guilt or division. Through the bond, I felt his self-loathing, his shame at feeling relieved by his wife's death. And I felt something else too, his absolute certainty that despite everything, he'd made the right choice in binding himself to me. We're both terrible people, I said, or terrible beings, or whatever we are now. Maybe, or maybe we're just people doing the best we can in impossible circumstances. He took my hand. Lilith, I need you to promise me something. What? That you'll never lie to me again. Not about the big things. If you think I need to hear a hard truth, tell me. Don't protect me from reality. I can handle it. Could he? I wasn't sure. But through the bond, I felt his sincerity, his need for honesty even when it hurt. I promise, I said. No more merciful lies, just truth, however brutal. Good. He pulled me closer. Because if we're going to be partners for the next however many decades, we need to be able to trust each other completely, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I kissed him then, tasting salt from his tears and mine, sealing the promise we just made. A promise that would define the rest of our partnership. Brutal honesty balanced by unshakable devotion. It wasn't the fairy tale romance mortals dreamed of, but it was real, and it was ours, and it was enough. Epilogue, chains freely chosen. 20 years later, I stood in the cemetery and looked at Ezra's grave. He'd lived longer than any mortal should have, the binding stretching his natural lifespan well beyond what was normal. But even extended life eventually ends, and 2 weeks ago his heart had simply stopped while he slept. Peacefully, without pain, surrounded by the family and community he'd devoted his existence to protecting. He'd been 73. We'd had 33 years together. It should have been enough. But through the bond, which remained even in death, a ghost of connection still linking my immortal soul to his departed one, I felt the absence like a wound that would never fully heal. He loved you very much. I turned to find Eliana standing beside me. She was 46 now, a rabbi in her own right, carrying on her father's work. She'd married, had children of her own, built a life that honored his memory. I loved him too, I said, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. I did. My David isn't magical or immortal, but he sees me as a person first, a woman second, a rabbi third. He doesn't try to diminish me or control me. We're partners. She looked at me curiously. Will you stay? In Prague, I mean, now that Father's gone? It was the question I'd been asking myself for 2 weeks. The binding was broken, my power fully my own again. I could leave, resume my eternal wandering, find a new place to hide and a new identity to wear. But when I thought about leaving, I felt Ezra's ghost presence through the remnants of our bond, felt his gentle insistence that I stay, that I continue the work we'd started together. I'll stay, I decided, at least for a while. Your community still needs protection, and I've grown accustomed to this place, to being known, to having a purpose beyond mere survival. Good. Eliana squeezed my hand. Because you're family, Lilith, and family doesn't abandon each other. Family. The word still felt strange applied to me, but it was true. Over the past 3 decades, I'd become woven into this community in ways I'd never experienced before. I was Aunt Lilith to Eliana's children, the mysterious benefactor who funded refugees and orphans, the wise woman who knew ancient remedies and stranger magics. I'd stopped hiding and started living, and it had all begun with one desperate rabbi who'd been crazy enough to seek out a demon and brave enough to see past the monster to the woman beneath. He changed me, I said quietly. Your father. Made me believe that I could be more than what paradise made me into, more than the villain in someone else's story. You changed him too, made him believe that love could be partnership between true equals, that power didn't have to corrupt or dominate. Eliana smiled. You were good for each other, and you gave him 33 years of happiness. That's a gift, Lilith. Don't diminish it by focusing on the ending. She was right. The story wasn't defined by how it ended, but by how it was lived, and Ezra and I had lived our partnership fully, facing impossible choices, making difficult sacrifices, loving each other through joy and grief and everything in between. We'd been bound by chains of desire that became chains of devotion, freely chosen and faithfully maintained. And if I'd learned anything from my millennia of existence, it was that freely chosen bonds, however temporary, were worth more than any eternal imprisonment, even in paradise. I stayed at the grave until sunset, saying my final goodbyes. Then I walked back through the Jewish quarter, through streets I knew as well as I'd known the garden, past houses where families I'd helped lived and thrived, toward the home Ezra and I had shared. I would stay, I would continue the work we'd started, I would be family and friend and protector for however long this community needed me. Because that's what love meant, not possession or obsession, but freely choosing to stay, to serve, to build something larger than oneself. Ezra had taught me that, and I would honor his memory by living it every day for however many centuries I had left. The first woman cast out of paradise for refusing submission had finally found her own version of Eden. Not in a garden of perfect innocence, but in the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of chosen partnership and earned belonging. And it was more than enough. Relief flooded through him via our connection. Of course, yes, I shouldn't have pushed. I'm sorry. But he wasn't sorry, not really. Through the binding, I could feel his hope, his certainty that given time I would agree, that love would conquer my fear. I wasn't sure if I wanted him to be right or wrong. We returned to feeding the ward, but the ease between us had fractured. Every touch now carried the weight of his question, the possibility of forever hovering between us like a ghost. The second day passed in strange tension. Rebecca brought us meals, and Eliana came to visit, chattering about feeling well enough to return to her studies. Through the window, I could see the city preparing for the pogrom, guards gathering, weapons being sharpened, the machinery of religious violence grinding into motion. But the ward held. Every time a guard approached the quarter's borders with violent intent, they found themselves turning away, forgetting why they'd come, wandering off to other tasks. It was working exactly as designed. "They'll give up soon," Ezra said, watching the city with satisfaction. "The Emperor's representative will wonder why his guards keep failing to follow through, but he'll find no evidence of magic. No demon to blame, no witch to burn, just divine providence protecting the innocent. Don't be naive. They'll try again. They always do. Maybe, but we'll have bought time. Given my people a chance to prepare, to petition the Emperor directly, to find protection through legal means. That's all we can do. Buy time and hope it's enough." Through the binding, I felt his weariness. He was so tired of fighting this battle, of watching his people persecuted for the crime of existing differently, and he was starting to see us, as a solution, a way to protect them not just this once, but permanently. That's when I realized what he truly wanted. "This isn't about love," I said quietly. "Not really. You want to bind yourself to me permanently, so you can use my power to protect your community forever." He flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? Be honest, Ezra. If I were just a woman, mortal and powerless, would you be asking me to soul bond with you? Or is it my immortality you're in love with? My ability to solve problems you can't solve with prayer and scholarship?" "Both," he admitted, and through the binding I felt his shame and his sincerity. "Yes, I want your power. I won't lie about that. But I also want you. The woman who saved my daughter despite having every reason to refuse. The exile who understands what it means to be demonized for refusing submission. The ancient being who still cares enough to help the powerless even when it costs her. I love all of you, Lilith, the power and the person. Can it be both? Could it? I'd spent so long assuming that anyone who wanted me must want to use me that I'd forgotten it might be possible to be valued for both my strength and myself. "I don't know," I whispered. "Then let me prove it to you." He took my hands, and I felt the sincerity radiating through our bond. "After the ritual completes, after the ward is permanent and my people are safe, I'll release you from the binding. I'll let you go with no strings, no obligations. And if you choose to come back, if you decide on your own that you want this bond to be permanent, then we'll make it so. But the choice will be entirely yours." "And if I don't come back?" Pain lanced through him, sharp and terrible, but he didn't look away. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life grateful for these 3 days, for knowing what it felt like to love and be loved completely, even if only briefly, and I'll raise my daughter and serve my community and remember you every day until I die." Damn him for offering me freedom and making it feel like a trap, because I knew, through the binding I knew, that he meant every word. He would let me go. And if I walked away, I would spend eternity wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to stay. "The 3rd day approaches," I said, deflecting. "We should focus on preparing for the final stage of the ritual." He nodded, accepting the deflection, but through our bond I felt his hope. He thought he was winning, thought his love and honesty would be enough to convince me. Maybe they would be, or maybe I'd run, as I always did, choosing safety over connection and loneliness over risk. Only time would tell. Chapter 3. The final test. The 3rd day dawned gray and cold. The last day before the Emperor's decree would expire and the threat of immediate violence would pass. The ward had held perfectly. Not a single Jew in the quarter had been harmed, and the city guards had given up trying to enter, convinced that some bureaucratic error had made the whole enterprise pointless. Rabbi Ezra's community was safe. The ritual had worked, which meant the binding would soon dissolve and I would have to choose. We sat in his study as the sun rose, hands clasped, maintaining the final threads of power that held the ward in place. When noon came, the ritual would complete. The ward would stabilize into a permanent protection that would last for years without our intervention, and the bond between us would begin to fade, unless we chose to make it permanent. You don't have to decide now, Ezra said softly, feeling my anxiety through our connection. The option remains open for 3 days after the ritual completes. You can leave, think about it, and if you want to return and seal the bond, you can. And if I don't return, then I'll remember you as the woman who saved my daughter and my people, as my partner in magic and, he smiled sadly, in love for however brief a time we had. Through the binding, I felt his sincerity. He meant it. He would truly let me go, even though it would break his heart. That's what made the choice so impossible. If he'd tried to trap me, I could have hated him and fled without guilt. But he was offering freedom, genuine freedom, and somehow that made staying feel like an equally genuine choice rather than a surrender. Tell me about her, I said abruptly. Your wife, Rebecca, do you love her? He wasn't surprised by the question. Through the binding, he'd felt it forming. In my own way, yes, not the way I love you, not with this intensity. Our marriage was arranged, practical, but we've built a life together, raised a daughter together. We respect each other, care for each other. Is that love? Perhaps. It's certainly partnership. And she knows about this? I gestured between us. About what we've done these past 3 days? She suspects I've developed feelings for you. She's not stupid, but she also knows that my priority is keeping our daughter and our community safe. She'll accept what I've done if it serves that purpose. How very convenient for you. He flinched. You think this is easy for me? That I'm not torn apart by what I'm feeling? Lilith, I've devoted my life to my faith, to the law, to being a good husband and father and rabbi. And then you walked into my world and shattered every certainty I had. I don't have neat answers. I just know that when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I've ever felt. And I don't want to lose that. Even if it means betraying your wife, your faith. My wife would survive my death and eventually remarry. That's expected, accepted. How is this different? And as for my faith, he paused, considering. The texts say God created man and woman to be partners, equals. That's what you and I are, equals in power and purpose, choosing to work together rather than one submitting to the other. Maybe that's more faithful to divine intention than any traditional marriage has ever been. It was a rationalization, but not an entirely dishonest one. Through the binding, I felt his genuine struggle, his attempt to reconcile what he felt for me with what he'd been taught to believe. You're asking me to upend my entire existence, I said quietly. To trust that this won't destroy us both. To believe that love is enough. I'm asking you to take a risk on something beautiful. That's all. No guarantees, no certainties, just possibility. The sun climbed higher. 11 o'clock, 1 hour left before the ritual completed, and I would have to choose. That's when Rebecca appeared at the study door. May I speak with her? She asked her husband. Alone? Ezra looked at me, and I nodded. He left, closing the door behind him, leaving me facing the woman whose husband I'd been loving for 3 days. Rebecca was perhaps 40, with intelligent brown eyes and graying hair tucked neatly under her head, covering. She studied me with the same scholarly intensity her husband brought to ancient texts. You saved my daughter, she said finally. I did. And my community. Yes. And now you're considering taking my husband from me. I met her gaze steadily. He's considering binding himself to me. I haven't decided if I'll allow it. A small smile crossed her face. Good. That shows wisdom. May I sit? I gestured to the chair across from me. She settled into it with the grace of someone comfortable with her own authority. I need you to understand something, she said. Ezra is a good man, but he's also an idealist. He sees the world as it should be rather than as it is. He thinks love conquers all, that knowledge is power, that there are solutions to every problem if you're just clever enough. She paused. He's wrong about that last part. Some problems don't have solutions, they just have consequences. Why are you telling me this? Because if you bind yourself to him, you need to know what you're getting. He'll never stop trying to fix the world, never stop taking on impossible challenges, never stop putting himself between his people and danger. It's who he is, noble, exhausting, and utterly unwilling to accept that he can't save everyone. I thought of the past 3 days of Ezra's determination to protect his community no matter the cost. I've noticed, and he'll expect the same from you. If you stay, you won't get to hide anymore. You'll be drawn into every crisis, every struggle, every battle against injustice that he decides to champion. Because that's what partnership with him means, fighting alongside him against impossible odds. You sound like you're trying to talk me out of this. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're choosing, she leaned forward. But I'm also here to tell you something else, something he's too honorable to say himself. What? That if you don't choose him, it will destroy him. Oh, he'll survive. He survived worse. But the light in him, the hope that makes him who he is, that will die. He'll go through the motions of being a husband and father and rabbi, but he'll be hollow inside, because he's tasted something he never imagined could exist. A partnership of true equals, someone who matches his passion and his power, and he'll spend the rest of his life mourning its loss. Her words struck deep, confirming what I'd already felt through the binding. Ezra would let me go, yes, but it would cost him everything that made him him. So you want me to stay, to make your husband happy even though it means sharing him? I want you to make an informed choice. Stay or go, but understand the consequences either way, she stood. And for what it's worth, I don't hate you. I don't even resent you, not really. You've given my family life and safety. If the price for that is sharing my husband with an immortal being who actually appreciates his brilliance and his madness, well, she smiled sadly. I've made sacrifices for my people before. This is just one more. She left before I could respond, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the countdown to noon. 15 minutes left. I stood and walked to the window looking out at the Jewish quarter, the narrow streets, the bustling market, the synagogue's ancient walls. All of it safe because Ezra had been crazy enough to seek out a demon and compassionate enough to see me as something more than a monster. He'd given me a gift I'd never expected, the chance to be valued for both my power and my personhood, to be seen completely and loved anyway. Could I walk away from that? Should I? 10 minutes. I closed my eyes and reached through the binding, feeling Ezra on the other side. He was in his daughter's room, watching her read, savoring these last moments of connection to me before the bond dissolved. Through his eyes I saw Eliana, healthy, vibrant, alive because I'd chosen to help, and through his heart I felt his love for his daughter, for his wife, for his community, and for me. Not as separate things, but as interconnected threads of devotion that defined who he was. Loving him wouldn't mean losing myself. It would mean becoming part of something larger, a family, a community, a purpose beyond mere survival. 5 minutes. I made my decision. I ran from the study, through the house, up the stairs to Eliana's room, burst through the door just as the clock struck noon and the ritual completed, the ward settling into permanent stability, the binding between Ezra and me beginning to fray and dissolve. "Don't let it go!" I gasped. "The binding! Hold on to it! I choose this! I choose you! I choose us!" His eyes widened, hope blazing across his face. Through the dissolving bond, I felt his joy, his relief, his love crashing into me like a wave. He reached for my hand just as the last thread of magic was about to snap, and together we spoke the words that would make the binding permanent. The world shifted. Magic sealed around us, through us, binding soul to soul in a way that transcended either mortal or immortal limitations. I felt his mortality anchor my eternity, give it weight and meaning and precious fragility. He felt my immortality expand his consciousness, show him vistas of time and possibility he'd never imagined. We became something new, not human, not demon, but a partnership that balanced both. When the magic settled, I opened my eyes and looked at him, truly looked, with vision that now encompassed both mortal and immortal perception. He was glowing, literally glowing with the power I'd shared with him, his lifespan extended but not infinite, his consciousness expanded but still fundamentally human. Perfect balance. "It worked," he breathed. "We did it. You're staying." "I'm staying. I agreed. God help us both. Eliana, who had witnessed the entire thing with wide eyes, cleared her throat. So, does this mean I have two mothers now? Because if so, I have a lot of questions about what I'm supposed to call you. Despite everything, I laughed, a sound of pure joy that I hadn't made in millennia. Let's start with Lilith, I said, and go from there. Climax. The test of faith. We had 3 days of bliss before everything went wrong. The binding held beautifully. Ezra and I moved through the world as one, complementing each other's strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. The community accepted my presence as the rabbi's assistant and ward guardian, too grateful for their miraculous salvation to ask too many questions. Rebecca adjusted with surprising grace, finding that having another woman to share household and community responsibilities with was actually easier than managing everything alone. It should have been perfect, but on the 4th day, a messenger arrived from the emperor. The pogrom had been cancelled, yes, but in its place a new decree. Every Jew in Prague was to convert to Christianity or face permanent exile within 1 month. No middle ground, no negotiation, convert or leave everything behind. The community was in uproar. Some argued for conversion. It was just words, they said. They could keep their faith privately. Others insisted on exile. Better to be faithful refugees than false Christians. And still others looked to Rabbi Ezra for guidance, for a miracle like the one that had saved them from the massacre. Ezra, to his credit, didn't try to give them easy answers. I cannot tell you what to choose, he said at the emergency gathering in the synagogue. This is a decision each family must make according to their own conscience and circumstances. Whatever you choose, know that God will understand. But in private, he was shattered. I failed them, he said that night, pacing his study like a caged animal. Through our bond, I felt his anguish, his rage at the injustice, his helplessness. I saved them from immediate violence only to deliver them to this impossible choice. What was the point? You bought them time, I said. You gave families weeks to prepare for exile instead of hours to prepare for death. That matters. It's not enough. I should have seen this coming, should have planned for... You're not omniscient, Ezra. Neither of us are. We did what we could. Then we need to do more. He turned to me with desperate intensity. The binding gives us combined power beyond anything either of us could achieve alone. We could convince the emperor to revoke the decree. We could cloud the minds of his advisors, make them forget this obsession with forced conversion. We could reveal ourselves as exactly the kind of demonic threat the church warns about and justify even worse persecution, I finished. Ezra, I know you want to fix this, but some things can't be fixed with magic. This is politics, religion, human fear, and hatred. Magic won't solve it. Then what will? Time, migration, the slow grinding work of cultural change. Things I've watched happen over centuries, not weeks. I don't have centuries. These are my people, suffering now, needing help now. Through the bond, I felt his breaking point approaching, the moment when his idealism would shatter against reality's indifference. I'd seen it happen to mortals before, watched hope curdle into bitterness or despair. I couldn't let that happen to him. Then we help them prepare, I said firmly. We use our resources to fund those who choose exile. We create networks of safe houses, establish contacts in other cities, ensure that families have what they need to start over. We can't stop the decree, but we can make its consequences less devastating. He stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. You're right. You're right. I can't save everyone, but I can help those I can reach. Through the bond, I felt him recalibrating, shifting from trying to prevent disaster to trying to mitigate it. We'll need money, connections, planning. I have money, centuries of accumulated wealth hidden in various places. And I know people, other beings, who remember what it's like to be persecuted, who might help. Other beings like you? Some like me, some different, but all with reasons to oppose religious persecution. We spent the next 3 weeks working ourselves to exhaustion. I liquidated hidden accounts and used Ezra's scholarship to create convincing documentation for refugee families. He reached out to his network of rabbis across Europe, building an underground railroad for those choosing exile. Together, we bribed officials, forged papers, and arranged transport for dozens of families. It wasn't enough to save everyone. Some chose conversion. And through Ezra, I felt his heartbreak at watching his community fracture. But we saved those we could, gave them hope and resources and futures beyond Prague's walls, and through it all the binding held strong. We were stronger together than either of us could have been apart. His faith and optimism balanced by my pragmatism and ancient knowledge, my cynicism and self-preservation softened by his compassion and sense of purpose. We'd become true partners, true equals. But the cost of that partnership became clear on the day of Rebecca's death. She collapsed suddenly, without warning. A seizure, the physician said.